All right, Elise, have a pretty serious question for you to start off with. Why do you think that modern day men fail so often at their relationships?
Well, that's a pretty strong question. I think a lot, I think we ask that question because a lot of men feel like they're failing at a lot of things in
And
today's
that's
society.
a part of it, absolutely.
They feel like they're failing at their careers, at their masculinity, at relationships, and there's a lot of aggression and anger between the sexes. There's so much polarizing content out there. So if we backtrack, right, we have our four types of wealth: the time and financial, the health and the social. And society has mostly focused and pushed men into being all financial,
Mhm.
all financial, all financial. Reject the social, reject your health, reject even your own time in sacrifice of the greater good, which is you being a man for your family. But what happens when you cut off your social and your health and your time is you start to burn out, right? So the
Absolutely.
modern day man is not failing in relationships, he's failing himself.
Mm. It's just
And
right.
it's not his fault either.
Whose fault is it?
Well, there is no fault, really. I mean, it's just an accumulation of societal expectations on both men and women, the pressure of having to raise families, the pressure of keeping up with the changes and responsibilities and not knowing like what is the correct role anymore. We don't know. Before we knew we had a kind of a guide map. And if you followed the map, you were pretty okay. Even just as a normal person, you go to college, you get a job, you were pretty set. Your job took care of you and you could stay in that job for 50 years. And now everything is changing. You have a job for like 2 years max, then you got to be hypergamous. Like everybody's just got to level up, continue looking up, so it's really hard for men to get a grip on where do I find my footing.
Yeah, I love that because one of the things, and it's been interesting because this was something that my dad was saying 20 years ago. I remember when I lived there, there were certain TV shows that were really popular, like Everybody Loves Raymond and, some of these other ones. And he hated these TV shows. And it wasn't anything about like the content necessarily. It was literally about the role of the man in these shows. And when you look at it, and I sit back and I go, oh my gosh, he was right. In American TV specifically, it's like you just don't see that much of like a strong, confident, family centered male role model. Normally, they're the comedic, laughter. The wife is normally the one that has all the things together. Maybe they're good. They'll like point out the moral of a story or something like that. But it's like we make fun of it. I have three kids. The best father figure on television nowadays is in the cartoon Bluey.
Mm.
And it's like he's the best male role model that I can find on television right now, and it's a cartoon. So I think that to your point, society for long, for whatever reason, has been moving in this direction, and then that's when I think that you end up with like the Andrew Tates of the world that end up showing up because he's really just filling this void on in an extreme way of, well, this is what being a man should be. And I think that there's enough men that are hungry looking for, well, what is this? I don't want to be this. So, okay, I guess I should be that. And the answer is really, guys, it's really somewhere in the middle. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, that soundbite's not breaking out anywhere.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting you pointed out the role of television because, like you said, like Homer Simpson, friggin' idiot. There's
Totally.
what is it like?
Family Guy, same thing.
The Family Guy. The only one that I can think of that had maybe a strong masculine figure was Red from that '70s show.
Oh gosh, yeah, you're right.
He was a dad, he was like a dad, but
And
and
that was
then
from the 70s. We were meant to
yeah,
laugh at it because it's like, oh, look how outdated this is, right?
well, and then in the opposition of that is like every movie, every hero movie has the man as the hero figure. So what society was really saying is there are heroes that exist, the masculine man that every man desires to be, but in everyday life you're an idiot. In
Right,
everyday life you're not going to amount to everything. In everyday life your wife is going to be the ruler of the house and hate you and make jokes about you. Like
right.
that's what the shows were about. They made the man look so dumb, and it also ingrained into men, I think, in a way, like, it never taught them how to be a partner.
No. Because then
It
on the
kind
flip side, you do have role models like, and I do love this show totally, Suits. And I get to claim to be an OG fan. Not everybody's finding it on Netflix now, but people love Harvey Specter in there. And he is one of the most well-written characters on television, but he is also the playboy, the eternal, just hyper focused on his career. There's no, oh yeah, I'm, really good at my job. I'm also a family man and I take care of my kids and I set a good role model for them. And yes, I have faults. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. It's like, again, it just plays to, like you said, these extremes that we just see in media.
Absolutely. And with that, you kind of sacrifice your soul. You can
Mm.
make it to the top and be a complete narcissist, but you have to absolve yourself of any accountability and any feeling and any true depth. I mean, there's narcissistic people who are successful all the time. Like, we're not going to
Right.
pretend that
Oh,
everybody
absolutely.
gets their due justice, but you
Yeah.
have to make a choice on what you want in life. And I know that maybe we're kind of digressing. I'm not sure how this fits into the role, but you have to decide, like, when you have the 4 types of wealth, if you're looking for balance, because at the end of the day, if you really want true fulfillment and happiness, you can get to the top being a narcissist and get all the wealth that you want, but it won't get you the feeling of teaching your child how to do something, or being proud that you were the mentor for someone and that you get to pass that on.
Well, I think it plays. I mean, it's. I don't think it is digressing from the standpoint of like, it's causal. It's very much at the root, and one of the things that I talk about in my masterminds is I refer to every single person that goes through it as the hero. I say you are the hero of this story, and every hero needs a villain. And the two villains that I'm constantly talking about are society, specifically the expectations that it sets for people, and then the other one is distraction. And I think they play very much hand in hand together. Now, I might have a question for you on the distraction side in a little bit, but sticking on the theme of this a little, what would you say would be, because while I do believe that it's not the fault of anybody in particular, it's not the fault of any guys or even women, for the way that society is necessarily. This is a cumulative effort of years and years of, the way we're going. And people are unhappy, not just men, but women too. And they're finding their value systems drastically different from each other. And it's making it hard to find partners. I saw a video online the other day of a woman saying, like, I'm just looking for a liberal man who looks like a conservative man. And I thought that was a super interesting take, because it's like, are we at the point now in society to where you can say conservative man versus liberal man and you have totally different mindsets of what that person physically looks like and how they act? I mean, I think we are kind of getting there. So for the question I want to throw out to you is, for men, regardless of your political affiliation, the thing that I always try to bring it back to is responsibility. And it's just, listen, it may have not been your fault, but we're not going to be victims here anymore. And it doesn't matter if your dad beat you. It doesn't matter if you had a great role model. It doesn't matter what society says. It doesn't. None of these things matter right now at this moment. Because if you reach this point of clarity of, I want to make positive changes, I want to set myself up to be the best partner that I can be for somebody, so I can be in a loving, relationship and work on these other 4 types of wealth. Because I'm very happily married. I have 3 kids, and my wife is a massive part of the reason of where I am in all 4 types of wealth. So what would you say would be some of the things that guys need to do when it's like, listen, if you find yourself living a life that you're like, you know what, I'm so focused on one type of wealth, I want to start focusing on the other. How do you even start doing that? How do you even start shifting the focus of, I've been so career oriented that now I want to focus on my health, the social aspects of my life, like all of these other things that I've been told doesn't matter? Where do you even begin?
Well, I just first have to say that I completely agree with your take on responsibility. The first thing that we all have to do is take accountability. Like you said, it's not our fault. And that's why we kind of go back to the very first question: whose fault is it? Well, we could say
Right.
anybody could
Yeah.
have a different answer for that. And at the end of the day, you could say, well, it's my fault. It doesn't really matter. What matters is you take accountability for where your life is now, because that's the only way you're going to know the direction it's going. And I think that's the difference. And like we said, not to get too political, but I think that's the difference right now and today between the liberal and conservative mindset. And they're both extremes. Not anyone's completely right or completely wrong.
Totally agree.
But that's why I mean, stereotypes do exist for a reason, because there are some foundations of truth between patterns, behavior patterns. And people who just take responsibility, no matter what they've been through, tend to live lives that they are proud of. If you constantly think that someone owes you something, or society should change to morph around your traumas or your identity, you're in the wrong, because that's not how the world works. God didn't create the world around you. God created the world and said, figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to adapt to the elements. So yes, society should change and adapt to some modern ways, but to expect that before you change is going to make you very miserable. So if you're somebody who is now trying to address the unhappy parts in your life, first take accountability. Say, I'm here in this position. Something within my own choices got me here. So now I'm going to address my ego, my identity that I've attached to, maybe the victim mentality, or having my entire identity wrapped up in a career, and understand if I want to start unwinding that. Because where a lot of men get stuck is they want to live a new life doing everything exactly the same.
Oh, that's great. That's a great point.
They want to continue busting their butt in the career and sacrificing everything else, but then just add more that is stressful, and add more and add more. But what they're adding isn't fulfilling. So it continues to drain, and then they become less effective in all areas. And they're like, well, that doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. And I'm also of the thought that there's no such thing as like balance, as in everything is all equal, but balance is in what makes me the most happy and fulfilled in this moment. I'm a huge fan of Alex Hormozy and his, ethos, and he likes to work. Him and Layla, they love working all the time. Like that's what fulfills them. They don't need to do like other stuff. And so there are no rules in life. There are no set paths except for the ones that we have adopted and choose to believe. So take a good look at where your life is and what is truly making you happy versus truly not making you unhappy, and be able to start releasing the ego and your identity around it. As soon as you can do that, you can start to shift things around really easily.
Yeah, it's a great point. And what you said brought to mind a saying that I like. Is called, it says, new levels equals new devils.
Mm-hmm.
And going to the point that you were saying of, yeah, like guys are trying to make these changes by just doing more of what they're already doing. And it's like, well, if you're already focused on going to the gym and, earning lots of money at your job, it's like doing more of that to be a better partner, to find somebody that you can be in a healthy relationship. It's not going to net you anything, because you're not actually taking on anything new. That is a new level in a totally different area. And it's like, that is going to require different things. So that was great. And I agree with you. I think that we kind of get stuck between, again, a lot of this conversation is going to end up talking about extremes. And it's like, on the one side, you have the, what I call true wealth. And I always have to clarify this, because I call it the balance of the four types of wealth: the time, social, health, financial. And what I have to tell people is, say, when I say balance, I don't mean equal, right? Because certain times in your life, they're going to be unequal, and they need to be. And like when my wife had our twin daughters, and we had 3 kids under 3, my wealth and my time, health, and social, or in certain areas, that went down dramatically, because I was needed so much for the care of them. We had preemie babies, all this other stuff. This was right around COVID was happening. Like, it was a crazy time. So I couldn't work on the other type. So a lot of times it is about, listen, it's not, you are always trying to get in the center of that and have it equally balanced. It's about the fact that there's going to be different seasons for them, but you don't want that season to become the standard. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people find, is that they just think, I'm going to get good at this one area of life, and then it's just going to be like that forever. And it's like, no, different stages are going to require different things of you, and that's okay. But you need to be able to adapt to that. What do you tell guys, whenever you're working in counseling with them. And one thing that I'm always huge on is this growth mindset versus victim mindset. And it's interesting how I think a lot of people can think they hear victim mindset and they just hear loser. And they're just like, oh, this person has a victim mindset, like they're losers and not doing anything with their life. And it's like, no, I know some guys with victim mindsets that are pretty successful. They're, in the medical community, advanced degrees, all this other stuff. But the way that they operate in their daily life is very reactive. It's very limited mindset, like all these other things. How do you work with people making that shift, going from a limited mindset to a growth mindset? And you can have a growth mindset in a lot of areas of your life as a caveat and still be limited in others. So it's not like, it's necessarily one or the other, depending on the type of person you are. But I think that's a huge key to success in just about anything.
Right. Well, I don't think that you can force someone to shift from a victim mindset to a growth mindset. My clients are coming to me with a growth mindset. I think a victim mindset is someone who absolves themselves of responsibility.
Okay.
That's how I see a victim mentality, is like, woe is me. I can't do anything to change my circumstances. It's all mom and dad's fault, or it's all, I'm like this because of this. And so I definitely think, like you said, doctors and lawyers, they can have a victim mentality because they're like, oh, my life sucks and I just can't do X, Y, Z. I tend not to see people be very successful if they do have a true victim mentality. And I would say victim mentality is a loser mentality. I'm going to disagree with you there.
Well, sorry, no, I agree. It's a loser mentality.
Can't
I just meant like, it doesn't
like,
mean like they're all broke basically or something.
yeah, maybe not, but they will eventually become broke because they self-sabotage.
Mm.
If they are truly like, and they're not willing to escape it, I've known people with this, and I, it's very easy to predict the future. You can see where they start to go wrong.
Very true.
And sometimes you have to allow them to hit rock bottom before they're like, dude, like, actually, I have to change. And that's when they start taking control, but they usually have to lose everything first. So yeah, I mean, you can't force anybody to go from a victim to a growth mindset. It has to be something that someone chooses.
Okay. Let me shift a little bit up with you on this, because I know you work primarily with men. I have a large male following.
Well, I'd love to go back to the relationship thing that you were talking
Oh,
about.
okay. Yeah, please.
The seasons of masculinity. Let's touch a little bit on masculine versus feminine
absolutely.
energy. So I love how you said there's going to be seasons, and how not to make one a certain focus point or like get too attached to one. There's huge, argument between men and women today. What are the roles? And there's this huge bid towards going back to traditional roles where the woman stays at home and the men's a provider. Like, we get so focused, like men get so focused. Women can read between the lines, men usually cannot. Men are like, I have to see it as it is. If I give an example to my clients, sometimes they will only address the example I gave. And I'm like, oh, listen, I'm just using that as an example. Like, you have to attach it to something else that makes sense for you. You cannot just attach to this example and like have that be the only thing. So when men hear people like Andrew Tate, and it's like the wealth, the cars, get as many women as you can, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think Andrew Tate has a lot of good points that he makes, but like we said, we're in the extremes. So when we hear the word provider, we only think money. But what you gave as an example, where your wife was at home and you had these 3 children under a certain age, you were so needed. That is being a provider. By helping your wife in her time of need. You are still providing safety and comfort and support. And I think that when we transition to thinking less, straight answered, and more of an umbrella of energy, then we start to mend the wounds in relationships. Because I think a lot of men are suffering today from the wounded feminine, right? The woman who has become overly masculinized. She doesn't feel safe, so she feels like she has to work and do everything by herself. So she pushes the male providership away. Like in the male providership being not only his monetary success, but his support, his strength, his ability to hold her. And she does it, not like some women do it because they're like, I don't need no man. But some women do it because they thought, and they've been taught, that that's what would help them get respect from the man, or
Mm,
that's what would help their man love them more. When really the men and men, because of that energy, are like, well, she should pay 50-50, right? Because now it's no longer a man and woman relationship. Now it's like a man and man relationship.
right.
And it's
Yeah,
like, well, if you're going to be my bro, if you're going to be my roommate, we might as well pay half the rent, right? And
exactly.
this is the really sad part, because the feminine energy for a man can be the thing that helps him find balance. Like you said, your
Yeah.
wife has helped you find balance. And all. If she is truly in her feminine, she doesn't have to work and pay half the bills. She
Mm,
provides it with her energy. She's nurturing, she's caring, she's calm, she's peaceful. Just her essence, her joy is what a man needs to find that balance. And
mhm.
so it's really tough today, because men are not finding that type of woman, so they're rejecting women altogether, and women are feeling the rejection of the man, so they're becoming colder.
Oh, I love that. And I think one of the things going back to television, in masculine and feminine energy, there was a show that came out just recently called Shogun, and it's like 16th century Japan, something like that. And I found it amazing because there's a lot of moving pieces in this, but what you end up finding out is that the show's really about this one woman, even though you can't really tell that at the beginning. Like, she's a part of it. Like, she's obviously a big character, but you don't realize how crucial she is. And it's like that was an extremely male dominated society. But what you see in this woman's feminine energy is such strength under stress and grace. And I think that for both men and women, there's been this perverted view of feminine energy in general, of the fact that feminine energy is not strength, it's not strong, it's weakness. And I think that's just so wrong. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I think you're right. It's like for men, it's like you hear the word feminine energy and it's just this immediate rejection of that in all of its forms necessarily. And it's like, no, 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 that's not the case. Can you talk a little bit about like let's really break down what that is for people to make sure that there's a proper understanding of what that is.
Yeah. So, I mean, to also put it in perspective, both men and women have both masculine and feminine
Yes.
energy, like the yin and the yang. And both men and women, when in balance, are balanced people. So society has kind of pushed us to extremes with the roles that it's now placed on us, with the shows that it's given us. And then we morph our behavior based upon our upbringing and where we're at. Some people have very happy, healthy relationships that, like last 50 years, and they find other people, and then like those exist today. But what we see portrayed in the media are these extremes, and people are cheating and betraying each other. And so, that being said, when I'm talking about everything is balanced, like women have been portrayed as crazy, emotional, don't have any logic. They're just in their emotions. And that's just like so untrue. If a woman has embodied her essence, she's actually very strategic, very logical. She and a woman's superpower is her ability to understand emotions and empathy at such a
Mhm.
in such a way that she is very psychic. She understands human behavior because she has to. If you're raising children, you have to understand what the baby is crying for, because babies can't speak, right? So you become so in tune. Do they need their diaper change? Are they asking for milk? Do they want to move positions in the chair? And when you become that in tune, you can make better business decisions. You can understand if somebody's going to hurt you or not. So when a woman is in her essence, she can be very strategic and logical and centered. But it's when she knows something in her intuition and the other person is lying or betraying, she gets crazy because she knows that she's right and she's just being gaslit. And
Right.
obviously some women are crazy because they are emotionally immature. Like, we're not going to go to the extremes in this kind. We're assuming health, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
The feminine energy in its health is
We have enough
instinct,
examples of what the
right?
extremes look like at this point.
So when she finds a man who she knows is going to provide for her and keep her safe and be her protector, as an umbrella, not just like, oh, I've got guns and I'm gonna, shoot down the anyone who comes to the door.
So sometimes guys need to protect their wives
Right.
from their children. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, we don't talk
I'm
about
so
that
glad you
enough.
brought that up. I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up. It's like the debate. There's a debate on the internet, wife child or partner. We can get
Mm,
into that in a second, but it's like,
okay.
when she can fully trust her partner, she will also do anything for him. And you see it in the animal kingdom. The female lion protects the male lion.
Right.
She's the one who goes out and hunts. You can see it in the animal kingdom everywhere.
Mhm.
Masculine and feminine energy has nothing to do with the tasks, has nothing to do with the roles.
Yes.
It's an energy,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
There's no biology isn't confused with a male lion and a female lion, but their roles are different depending on what we assume humans are meant to do, right? The female is the one who goes out and hunts, and the
Mhm.
man stays and protects the pride, right? The male peacock is the one who shows off all the pretty feathers and is beautiful and does the dance. So it's just very interesting, and a lot of these podcasters try to come on here and make women feel bad about their biological needs, and they always try to use
Mhm.
history and whatever, but they're not understanding the literal biology that is in everyday life.
Or they're manipulating it for their own worldview.
Right. I mean,
Because
all
you hear that all the time. And I love what you said about that. Like I was talking to my son about this the other day. We were talking about ducks in a pond. And he said, Dad, why are the boy ducks the pretty ones? And I thought that was a very good question because we're looking at like the female ducks, they're brown. Well, why is that? Because they're camouflage, because they're sitting on the nest most of the time. And the male ducks are out there because they need to attract a mate. They're putting work in out there. They're the distraction. And there's a lot of things behind that. So it's like, to your point, it's like we get stuck in these perverted views of what this masculine and feminine energy is. And it's like a lot of times your answer is, hey, look around you at nature and you'll find it. You'll find the answers there. If we model a lot of that again, we're going to go back to some semblance of balance because it's working for them. So,
right.
it can work for us too.
Nature is truth, because it doesn't need to be manipulated. If you are someone who
No.
needs to manipulate statistics in order to prove your point or support your belief system or your way of life, you're insecure about your way of life and who you are.
Well, okay. So I want to talk about manipulation real quick because we are at one of the lowest, if you look at as long as they've been measuring trust, we are at one of the lowest points of trust in our society that we've been in decades. It's been a long time. People don't trust the government. They don't trust the media. We're losing trust in healthcare very quickly. And as somebody who pays a lot of attention to money and economics and things like that, I see the manipulation of the data that they put out around things like inflation and all this other stuff on a regular basis. It's like, well, hold on. I know I just went to the grocery store and 6 months ago, this only cost me $150 and the same stuff cost me 200, but you guys are telling me it's better. How is that? So, and it's like, there's such a clear contrast between, what we see in real life and then what the experts or the people running the show are putting out there. And then you look behind the curtains, you realize, okay, well, they took out that and they took out that, and that's why the number's better. So, all that being said, in a time when we have such low trust, when we don't know what these expectations are, like what we should be, what do you recommend looking at? Who do you recommend, or what questions, better yet, since we are taking responsibility for ourselves, do you recommend men to ask themselves whenever they're searching for those answers, whenever they're looking for sources that they can trust on what they should do?
I don't think you should look externally for
Okay.
sources to trust necessarily. Trust is
I
built
love that.
over actions and consistency.
Mm,
And if you've been consistently shown that actions and words do not align, or there are lies and manipulations in the government or in your household, even, all you can trust is the data. Like, don't make your trust based upon emotions and because you love someone or you have a belief system in something. I think us as a society, I really think that we're starting to see the cracks in the illusion.
yeah.
And I think we're making a bid towards sovereignty. I think a lot of people are calling, they want to grow their own food. They want to have
Mhm.
their own homesteads. They want to be off the grid because we've seen just now when the computer system had a blip in it and suddenly planes are down.
Yeah.
Crazy. And you cannot look at that and say, oh yeah, I totally believe it was just an oopsie daisy. Because if you're a person of any type of logic, and computer programmers around the world are losing their minds because there is no way, even someone who's built a regular website, there's no way you launch something live when it has the ability to break down your income or anything like that without
No.
first testing it 2, 3, 4, 5. And when it comes to the airlines, you think you're just going to shut off the internet while planes are in the sky?
And by the way, it's like from a guy who worked with a lot of leaders in IT for some of the biggest companies out there. It's like it's like think of all the things that had to go wrong. First,
There's a million fail safes. Like you
that billion
have
dollar
to
company had to fail.
purposefully.
Then Microsoft had to fail at checking, and then every individual computer for this very basic computer glitch had to fail when they did the other. There's so many different levels of like how that's just not even possible, and it's
Yeah.
like we'll be looking back in 15 to 20 years and we may not understand why somebody pulled the trigger on that this time, but we'll look back in 15, 20 years and go, oh, okay, yeah, that crucial thing that we were going to use to keep our leaders in check, that now the data is mysteriously gone. That's what that was for.
Right. And it's so crazy. So when you look at things like that,
yeah, that's a great example.
You can't just be like continuing to live in an illusion and a lie and say, oh, it was an accident, or you're gonna be trapped.
Yeah.
If you are someone who wants to be, but you be sovereign, develop your own system of success. Like it doesn't matter. And because on the real, it doesn't matter who the president is for me. It doesn't matter like where I'm at in the world. It doesn't matter what's going on. I'm making myself indestructible, right? Like, how am I preparing myself to survive in any dynamic, any environment? I've lived in many countries, like, how can you prepare yourself? You have to be your own backup generator.
How important,
get tough.
I feel like a trait, going to the point you just made, I talk about this a lot. And one thing that I've really struggled with, like, how do you cultivate this? The best thing that I can come up with is curiosity plus awareness. But I'm curious what your take is on this. I think that for people in general nowadays, in the fast-paced world that we live in, how high does the character trait of adaptability rank for you? And then do you have any recommendations on how we can become better adapters to the situations in the world around us?
I think adaptability is good, but I think above that, you have to have, there's a certain word, I'm just losing it right now, like okay. Logic and the ability to understand, like just common sense. Because you want to be adaptable to a certain point, but you don't want to just be adaptable to a point where you're just accepting every single new rule, new change, new system that's put into place. Like you
need a strong filter.
Right. You need to have the wisdom to understand what is supposed to be adapted to, because then you also have to have courage then to stand your ground when you don't want to conform.
Love that. Yeah. And that's a very good point. And that is, by not conforming in a way is its own form of adaptability, because it's like, well, now everybody's going this way. Well, now I'm going to be going the opposite way, and there's going to be tension and stuff. And I love what you said there about courage. And it's like, you have to have that within you to know that. I mean, it's amazing to me to see nowadays the things that people will say online about certain social topics that if you would have done that even 2-3 years ago, I guarantee you're getting fired, right? From your job. And it's interesting to see, again, the cultural wave making big shifts for whatever reason. And, I believe that courage is something that we need more and more of nowadays, as we can't trust leaders. And I think, honestly, I'm probably going to end up writing this on a sticky note. I love my sticky notes. They're always getting written down and on the desk. But I believe, what were you saying? Trust, should be based off consistency and action. Is that what you said earlier? Yeah, I think that's just an absolute home run there. Because if you apply that, if you're a man out there looking for a woman, and you're like, can I trust her? Trust her consistency in her actions. If you're a man and you're looking at yourself and you're going, well, how do I know I can do this thing? Well, look back. We have the saying in the financial world, whenever you're looking at a stock and it's like red that day, we're like, hey, don't freak out, zoom out. And it's like, don't get stuck in the moment, zoom out and be like, well, hey, you know what? I've been here for 30 years. And I went through this and that, and I made it through. So I think I can handle this one too. And I love that as kind of a modus operandi to move forward of, if you're trying to figure out what to trust, then pay attention to the action and pay attention to the consistency based off of whatever that thing or person is, including yourself. And then that's where the trust will come from.
Absolutely. That's the first thing I tell men as well is if you tell yourself you're going to go to the gym and you don't do it, or you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to start this business and you don't do it, then every day, little by little, you're breaking your own self-trust. And then you start to self-project that onto others and you start to get really angry and you don't know why, but it's because you don't trust yourself. And if you don't trust yourself, you're not a leader. And when you don't feel like a leader, you're not feeling in your masculine. And when you're not feeling in your masculine, you start to go down the victim mentality and oh, it's this person's fault. And I didn't do it today because of this person, or my boss is such a jerk. But once again, I'll bring up Alex Hormozi because this podcast that he did was so good. And I really love him because he is not afraid to be so himself that, you know, there's a certain type of confidence that you get when people try to cancel you and you know you can't be canceled.
Right.
I think that's why a lot of people have respect for Trump because they keep trying to cancel him and even kill him.
The ultimate cancellation.
And his ultimate cancellation. Game over, dog. Dude's got
a head tilt away from it.
Just won't die. You know, they just keep trying. Meanwhile, Biden is probably already dead. He's just in a bag of skin. That I mean, God, I could get canceled for this podcast. You know?
Hey, I'll join you with it on that one. It's worth talking about.
But like what he said, and because he says things that everybody thinks, but no one really wants to say. And I think once you get a certain status, you can start doing that. He talked about how, you know, some people do get disadvantages. Like sometimes Black people do get disadvantages.
Yeah.
Younger kids get less respect than adults. You know, if you're a woman, sometimes you get disadvantages. And he's like, whatever. Like, you just have to work that much harder and prove them wrong.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel that much better when you make it to the top because nobody can say anything. Nobody can say anything because you did the work.
Right.
And I just really, really appreciate that. And I think people who have overcome barriers appreciate that too because they've done the work.
It's true. Now, I will say this, since we're playing influencer name drop here, this is fun. I will see your Alex Hormozi and I will raise you a Cody Sanchez because are you familiar with her at all?
I know of her.
Okay. So I'm a big fangirl, as I like to tell people of her. And she is kind of like, if you remember the show Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe back in the day, she's kind of like the modern day female version of him. And she's even kind of starting to do some stuff with him. It's great because she's all about blue collar jobs, boring businesses. She came from Wall Street. Now she buys up like these small Main Street businesses. She always talks about Wall Street versus Main Street. Anyway, I like Hormozi, where I think that, especially with some of his content recently, where he goes a little off balance for me, is around his why. I get a little shaky with him with some of the things that he talks about with his why. Like he's very much, you know, about I'm going to get to the $1 billion and kind of see what happens. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And that's great. And at least he has one, right? And like you said, you can't cancel him anymore because he's extremely secure in what he does. So I like a lot of the stuff he says. But the thing I like about Cody Sanchez even more is the fact that she, to me, at least communicates what she's building for. She, to me, has a much more relatable and stronger outspoken sense of why. And she loves to say that's the Latina in her. And the thing that I like about that is because at the beginning of any time I'm working with anybody and we're working on coaching and we're going through this strategy, the first thing that we do is figure out, why are you doing this? What's the driving motivation? And a lot of times people don't actually know what it is. And we have to kind of go through some questions and some self-discovery there to figure that out, because you can do a lot of the same things, but if you don't understand the why, then a lot of times what will happen in my experience is that when things get hard and when you are trying to make those positive changes and you are trying to go in a different area and you feel that resistance and you want to revert back to the old habits, it's the why that pushes you through to that next level and gets you through that. It's that I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this to take care of my parents who are getting older. I'm doing this because someday, even though I'm single, you know, I want to have a partner someday and I want them to be able to do whatever they want with their life and be a provider, whatever the case may end up being, right? There's a strong mission that's kind of built into that why. What do you find, when people are hitting, because that's always a point of inflection for me when I'm kind of coming in to help people. It's they're coming in because there's something they want to change and they just haven't been able to do it for one reason or the other. Is it a why? Is it strategy? Is it like what do you tend to see with people that you're working with of I want to make a change and I just haven't been able to do it so far?
Well, I coach two kind of different types of men. I have the men who are in my men's group, and then I have my one-on-one clients. My one-on-one clients are usually high profile executives, CEOs. They're very high performing. And it's really funny that I sense like a little bit of resistance and resentment for you against Alex Hormozi because he doesn't really have a why. And he openly admits that he doesn't really have one. He just wants to see the potential of himself exerted. And I think I really respect him for that because people who don't want children, who don't really care about pets or, like everybody sees them as so cold or like they're not relatable because majority of the world needs to have an external source because their internal drive is not strong enough.
Right.
And my one-on-one clients are more like Alex, where they don't really have a why that is based upon other people. They just want to see how far they can push their talent and skill set and then kind of share that with the world.
But that I don't want to take that away. That's a great example of a why, in my opinion. So but the question that I have and where I think you get the resistance with me and Alex sometimes, I think he's a brilliant tactician. Like you said, he's done things so many times that, you trust him because it's like, well, he's done this so many times and it's clearly working. So I have his books, they're fantastic. Where he loses me anyway is when he's openly said that he's a nihilist. And when you live a life to where you believe that nothing has any meaning, that's where I struggle to see, just with my personal worldview and the things that I believe. I've always viewed nihilism as a rich man's philosophy, because it's like, if nothing matters and nothing matters, then what's the point of doing anything? What's the point of serving anyone? What's the point? Where does that come from? Because I don't believe that, we're inherently good people. Like I believe, as a Christian, that we're inherently fallible, and that when you see situations like when we don't have the comforts of life that we have now and society kind of breaks down and they're like, well, it brings out the worst in people. Well, does it? Or does it just bring out who we are without all this other stuff covering us? So for me, it's like, that's why I think the why is extremely important to understand. And if your why is to just be the best version of you and see how far I can take my talents, I don't have a problem with that. But what's that for? What's the purpose of that?
But why do you care?
I care because I think it matters for effectiveness.
But why does it matter if he's more effective than me?
Well, I'm not talking about him specifically. I'm talking about
but I mean, in general, those people who are, but like the difference that is here is that like those people who think that way are going to achieve that success because like there are other people like Alex who are achieving success. If you're talking about the average man, they need a why.
Yeah.
And that's usually probably why they're not achieving what they want.
Yes.
And some part of them is benefiting from not achieving it because, it's then you don't have to interact with new devils.
Yeah.
I know the devil's on this level. I've beat this level of the game. Why would I embrace more trouble? Why, that's what people also get confused too, is the higher up you go, the more like the bigger and more stressful the problems get. Because like the more money you get, I think the easier life gets, but also the harder, because then people want to sue you.
Oh, I totally
more money in taxes. You have to get more creative about how you keep your money.
Oh, like, yeah. More money, more problems.
The more people want to take it, like the more people come after you, the more people want to control you. Like, look at Mark Zuckerberg, owner of Facebook, and his whole thing was all political. You think that was by his choice?
Right.
You think some secret government people didn't come up to him and be like, listen, this is the way that you're going to run Facebook. These are the things you're going to restrict. You think he just did that of his own accord? Why would he care?
Yeah.
He's not on his own agenda. He's not trying to run for president. He just made a social media that blew up and made him a bajillionaire.
He didn't even know what it was. Right.
Now he has to be a puppet because they're probably going to kill his whole family. We don't know, but like
Right.
anybody in power, once you have enough power, the secret shadows start coming out and start trying to control you,
I totally agree.
so it's just one of those things where it's like, of course there's safety in not succeeding.
Yeah. But where's the fun in that? So yeah, no, I'm not trying to say, yeah, and I love this back and forth and disagreeing on stuff.
We'll
But
see if people go in the comments section and start just
I
like,
know, right? Guys, come on, hit it up. So
yeah,
it's like,
let us know what your thoughts are on these things.
yeah, because well, I think it's important because it's like it's this question because I do believe that society, I mean, you look at like the birth rate nowadays and the amount of people that don't want to have children. And if you don't want to, that's fine. Or if you can't, it's fine. Like that happens. It's that's not that different from society, but we are at a point to where it's like people are having less kids. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Most of it is economical and totally understand that. It's expensive. But for me, the thing is not so much like about kids or even family. It's really comes down to its core of like, does your why really boil down to self or to serve? Like, is there any element of it? And by the way, it can be both. I truly believe it can be both. I am on a mission, to serve people, but then alongside that mission, I actually plan on making a lot of money. So me and my family can live the life that we want to live. So I don't believe the two are exclusive. I actually think probably combining a little bit of both of those is probably the best combo. But that's where I just question, I guess, number one, I think we both agree the fact that if you want to really make any kind of positive change in life, you do need a strong why. I think we're aligned there. I think the question that you and I are going back and forth on is like, how important is it what if it is a little bit of a selfish why? And it is like, hey, I just want to push myself to my limits. You think about Navy SEALs. I mean, those guys are I mean, I'm not saying there's not any thought of service for their country, but they're pushing themselves to some pretty crazy physical and mental extremes too. And there's definitely an element of that. That's just, I want to push myself to see how far I can go. So I think it's a great place for debate. Unfortunately, we're out of time, or we could continue to go down that one. But I would eat up another half hour with you just on that topic because I think that's a great place to dig into. Yeah. So I wanted to give you the final word. Anything that you find is, specifically to the high performers out there, what's one piece of advice that you love to leave people with? And then, please tell us where we can find you.
Specifically to the high performers, I think it's good to keep in mind that on your journey of self-healing or balance or whatever it is, remember, you don't have to sacrifice the skill set that got you here. Because a lot of men think that in order to find balance or in order to find happiness, they can no longer have the success that they work so hard for. And that's not true. We just want to start morphing our skill set to add fulfillment and happiness and, ease back into our life so we can feel a little bit more balanced. And that in return will make you 10 times more successful.
Oof. I love that. That's fantastic. Elise, this has been an absolute pleasure. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. And where is the best place for people to connect with you?
They can connect with me on any social medias at Elise Michaels, Micheals. I know you found me on LinkedIn. That's probably a good place to message me because I'll see it. TikTok and Instagram, I will probably not see it, but LinkedIn's where it's at,
Hey, it's slide into the DMs. It works on LinkedIn. The other ones can be a little tougher sometimes.
Exactly. Nailed it.
All right. Thanks so much.